What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Creativity Made Easy podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Peed, creative coach and consultant for your creative processes. I'm here to help creatives know themselves, their process, and their team so that they can create greater things together. I'm very excited. We're doing kind of all throughout the summer. We're having some guests on the podcast. If you missed last week's episode with Chris Comstock and the productivity hacks, do not miss that. Go back. I promise you, you want to listen and watch that episode. But today we have my good friend, my new friend, PJ Towle, who owns 43 Creative Marketing and Video Agency out of Indianapolis, Indiana. And today, PJ and I are going to discuss the art of self-marketing as creative professional. And what we're going to talk about is that the TikTok social media is the short game, but the long game may surprise you. So let's get into that in a second. But before we do, I would love for you to leave a 5-star rating and review if you're listening to this audio podcast and it's resonating with you at all. Share it with your friends. That really helps get this content out even further to creatives like yourself who can benefit from it. If you're watching on YouTube, I would love for you to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. All three of those things will help you know when these things are coming out every single week. You'll be the first to know so you can take part in this content for yourself. You can follow me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, all those places like that at Dustin Peed, P-E-A-D. Or if anything that I'm saying is resonating with you and you would love to chat with me more about it and how I can help you know yourself, your process, and your team so you can create greater things together, hop on over to dustinpeed.com and click on the Let's Chat button. That'll hop you on my calendar. So without further ado, let's get into my conversation with PJ Towle of 43 Creative. Check it out. All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. I want to welcome my guest, PJ Towle. PJ, we're so glad that you're here, man.
Thanks, man. Glad to be here.
So by now, I've introduced you to PJ, and you know what he's all about. We'll talk about where you can check him out later. If you're watching here on YouTube, you can see his Instagram handle, which, forewarning, he told me hasn't posted in well over a year. So if he's thinner, just know that that's recent. And if he's not, know that it was a long time ago.
I do stay pretty consistent in that realm. Like, I'm not in shape, I'm A shape. That's kind of the way that I look at things. Yeah.
Ooh, I'm stealing that. I like that a lot. All right. So today we're going to be talking about how to market yourself as kind of what I dub as creativepreneurs, because these are people who are kind of jack of all trades, maybe master of a couple. But for the most part, we kind of get the creative flow. We get the brainstorm. We get the briefing. We get the production. We understand what sweat equity looks like, like all this stuff, right? Like we're getting into it. And PJ and I, just behind the curtain, for my listeners, you know about me, Enneagram 4, PJ also Enneagram 4. So there's going to be a lot of similarities in here. And if you're like, that's just too many feelings on one podcast episode, I'll try to bring it back up to some happiness at some point. But we're both wearing black t-shirts, so let's see what happens.
And arm tattoos. Those are the big forearm tattoos. That's what
black
goes.
T-shirts, beard. I just need some thick ring glasses, and we got this thing covered.
There you go.
My in-ears also are black that, just like yours.
These are actually my backup in-ears. My other ones are wood green. They're a little more bougie. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I got backup in-ears too. I get it. I'm in that world. So we're going to talk about marketing yourself today as a creative professional, because most of us in this kind of creativepreneur world that we live in right now, we've been creating for other people for a long time. And now we're kind of creating for ourselves, and we're creating for our own businesses. And we all have, everybody, like 5 years ago, it was everybody has a podcast. Now it's everybody has an LLC, right? So we all have those things. But what do we do with it? How do we market ourselves? How do we get ourselves out there and really make the difference that at our core we really want to? And I wanted to start this conversation, PJ, by getting your take on defining each of our own unique value proposition. What does that mean to you as a creative preneur?
Finding the value prop on my end has been like this lifelong thing, right? Like, so I know you and I have a similar background where we both worked in churches and in nonprofits and did all of that creative stuff. Like we did the music, we did all the graphics and all those things. And so as you're learning all those different skills, for me, it turned into this, like, what's the thing that I bring to the table? I can build you a website. I can edit your podcast. I can paint you a picture. I can take your photos. I can do all that kind of stuff. But what's the thing that I bring to the table more than anybody else? And as I worked through good portions of that. I mean, it's an ongoing process. I feel like it changes all the time. But the one thing that I keep coming back to for myself is relationships. And I'm a very relational person. So yeah, Enneagram 4, wing 3 on the Enneagram disc. I'm 100% I and 90% on the D, if you're familiar with that. And then my adapted for disc, if I get stressed and I get into work mode and I really am going, I just completely flip flop that. So I'm 100% on the D, still 90% on the I. So I'm driving my decision making through relationships always.
Yeah.
And so for me, what I have found is finding that relationships matter has become my value proposition. So I know I told you when you asked me to be on the show here that I think I have the worst self-marketing plan of anybody ever. And I've said this to a couple of people and they're all like, that's the greatest marketing plan. So good or bad. My personal marketing plan for defining my value prop is really as simple as be cool, build relationships, not clients. So for me to figure out that the biggest thing that I'm bringing to a creative situation when I'm working with my clients is that relationship piece. I just have kind of led with that. And so even when I'm doing, presentations with people, doing a pitch on something, I always tell them, like, if I'm not your guy, that's fine. The worst thing that could happen is that we walk away from this situation and we can still be friends. I'm constantly happy to point people to other creatives that might be a better fit. It's just having a different mindset about building relationships than it is about, building my bank account or, checking that project off and moving on to the next thing. So trying to figure out how I can stay in that realm with people is really the value prop that I try to live out of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the ultimate value proposition for all of us, right? But I would love to know, how did you discover that? How did you go, okay, well, for me, out of all the little soft skills that I've picked up over the years in creative ministry, how and I mean, just to be frank with you, I think that probably ministry had a lot to do with building that value proposition in you. But how did you discover that for you, your differentiator, your unique value was in your relationships with other people?
I think the way I figured it out was just by being in it, right? I mean, it sounds like a passive answer, but I think being in the conversation, recognizing that these clients that I was getting close to were starting to call me about things that were going on in their personal lives. Or we could have long conversations about work and life and things all integrated in at the same time, without necessarily having to say, well, now we need to stop and we need to focus on this, or now we need to stop and we can focus on this. We just kind of put it all together in a way that it just kind of flows. I hate to say that. It feels like a really cop-out answer, but you're totally right. Being in ministry for 16 years, put me in a lot of relational conversations. And I think learning that with people really does play into how I push that value prop now.
Yeah, I think for those of us like yourself and I who maybe did some creative church work for a long time, that when we got into that game, it was all about what we were creating. It was all about our art, right? It was all about making things excellent. And as time went on, what we learned as we matured is that it was really more about the people, or in this case, it was really more about the relationships. And even going back to college, I know that there was successful people that I looked up to, and they always said, look, man, it's great that you're here in college learning these things, but really you need to be meeting as many people as you can while you're here, because once you leave here and you get out into the world, it'll be more about who you know than what you know.
Right.
So let's lean into that a little bit, PJ. Let's talk about some, like, what are your relationship or relational strategies? How are you forward moving in this value proposition of relationships being your unique attribute that you bring to the table? How are you pushing that forward? Where are you going? Where are you looking at? Or certain places that you're hanging out at or with? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I have always been, in songwriting, in service planning, back in ministry days, in all the different things, always very collaborative. And so I have really tried to surround myself with people that are similar, like-minded. In fact, real soon, we're supposed to be starting a network here in the Indianapolis area of like-minded creatives, of how we can just network and learn and grow off of each other. That's something that's been a real interesting step just over the last few months, trying to figure out, I think you mentioned before, everybody has an LLC. I think that's COVID's fault. We all had to figure out what we were going to do to survive. And so in that context, that's also was a real lonely period for people to figure that out. And so over the last couple of years, I've tried to, schedule lunches, schedule phone calls. That's how you and I connected the first time, was through our mutual friend, Darren Cooper, just to connect and chat and share. And I think that's really, really important. So, somebody jumps on my Instagram handle, sees that my last post was from over a year ago, talking about a Cubs game I was watching on TV. They can DM me there and, hopefully start a conversation, and we start talking and sharing and learning and growing from each other. And I just think collaboration in that is really, really important.
Hey, I want to interrupt this episode real quick just to ask you if there's anything that we're saying in this episode that resonates with you and you're like, this all sounds great, but I need help implementing these things. I would love to talk with you more about that. Go to dustinpeed.com, click on the Let's Talk button, and let's talk about how we can help you know yourself, your process, and your teams so that you can create greater things together. So how do you know, PJ, that you've won in this area, right? So if someone says that we're marketing ourselves, right, and part of that marketing is we're going to do a paid ad on social media, right? Like you can tell by clicks, or you can tell by discovery calls booked or whatever like that. How do you know that you are winning or you're doing this relationship thing right in terms of marketing yourself?
Well, from another creative standpoint, I think it's there's that little, let's call it dopamine hit, when a friend calls and says, "Hey, will you help me figure this out?" And, that's a good sign, because then I know they're trusting me. And I know that if I have a question on something that their focus is in or their niche is in, then I can call them too, because we've built that trust. We've built that relationship. I think same thing on a client end, when it becomes less about deliverables, and when it becomes more about, hey, just calling to check in, see how you're doing. Like, haven't seen you around in a little while. Let's grab lunch. Let's grab a beer. Let's grab a talk, whatever, like, let's just spend time together. And when I start to recognize those things happening in those client relationships that get beyond the work, I think that's how I recognize that I win or am winning. But then there's that weird thing with the 4 where we always feel like something is missing.
Yeah.
And then
about a 90% win is the biggest win you're going to feel.
Yeah. And then, which is real rough on my wing 3. Are you wing 5 or wing 3?
No, I'm wing 3 as well.
Wing 3. Okay. So at least for me with my wing 3, it's the 90% is not good enough. I got to keep going, right? Like, I got to keep pushing into that so that I can succeed and prove it. But one of the things that I've even learned over the last couple of years with that is to recognize when my win is when I'm helping my friends and my clients win. Right. So, perfect example. There's a client that I work with that then another third party runs all of their social media spend, and they're trying to hire some people. And so they ran a job fair. They ran a $100 paid ad on Facebook for it, and came out with 2 hires on the spot, and then a third one that was in the pipeline, which is the best $100 that they have spent on a recruiting thing in ever. Right. And so that had nothing to do with me other than making the graphic that they used for the social campaign through the social media manager. But we all walk away going, we did what we do well to help this client win. And now there's more trust that's being built, and we can keep leaning into that. So that's one of the harder things, I think, is knowing that 90% is the best personal win I'm ever going to get. But when I can help my clients continue to strive and reach and do their best, I think that's the thing.
Yeah. That's great. So most people, PJ, when they listen to a podcast like this and they go, that's great, but now what do I do? What would you say to the solopreneur or the creativepreneur who's starting in their own thing and trying to figure out how to market themselves? What are a few tips or pieces of advice that you would give them as they're entering into the marketplace for the very first time?
Number one piece of advice that I give anyone anytime they ask me that is take every piece of advice worth a grain of salt. Don't take it as canon or gospel right away. Like, you have to see if that's going to work for you before you can just say that it's going to. The other thing, the biggest thing I think, honestly, that I would say would be get uncomfortable. Get with people that you can be uncomfortable with and will still love you and work with you anyway. And from a networking standpoint specifically, I think like so much happens when we listen instead of just talk. It's something I'm working on with my kids right now, right? Don't wait for me to finish talking before you start talking. Think about what you're saying, listen to what I'm saying, and then how do we process and learn that together? That's from the kids' standpoint anyway. But I think that would be something I would say would be get into those groups, find those groups of people that you can trust. And they might not even be in the same industry. They might not be creatives as well, but they might be. And if they are, then I think a really cool ecosystem can be created there where you're being vulnerable and being open and being uncomfortable and letting people speak into you.
Yeah. So besides building relationships, what have you found as probably one of the biggest, catalysts, and helping your business get up off the ground and getting moving?
Probably some flexibility. So the short version of the long story of my business career is, even though I was in ministry, I started in 2007. Really, even before that, I was doing some branding projects, just kind of, on the side hustle thing. But in 2007, I started a business with a friend specifically focused on graphic design and brand management. And we did that as a side hustle for both of us for about 7 years. And then he got really into the print side of things and started a print company and has done really well for himself with that. And I just kind of let it go for a little bit. And then as I was transitioning out of full-time ministry, I leaned back into it because, when you're a creative ministry, you have this really particular set of skills, and where do we put it out there? And so as I leaned into that, I'm like, well, I know how to build websites. I know how to do branding packages. And so I'm just going to position myself doing that. Though I really want to do more branding, everything's leaning more to the website. So I gotta be flexible, and I gotta learn how to do that a little bit more. So I leaned in, built some relationships, got some coaching, got some training on how to do that process better. Then when COVID rolled around, a lot of it was, we don't need a website. We need to know how to have virtual presence. And so I found myself in a lot of these kind of phone calls on Zoom, showing people how to set up virtual studios on Zoom, or it wasn't called Google Meet.
Hangout.
Yeah. Google Hangout, which I did not ever really jive with. Though Google Meet now seems to be working pretty well.
That's what I hear.
Teams, whatever, but like teaching people how to like look into the camera, have a conversation, be focused. What does that look like? As if you were talking to someone in the same room. And so I spent a lot of time doing consulting on that front, sitting in on sales calls, helping people process through body language and those kinds of things. At the same time, I read Building a Story Brand. Everybody's read Building a Story Brand by now, I'm sure, especially that listens to your podcast. But in the process of that, like even recognizing the internal culture changes that need to happen for people to understand how to sell and make themselves marketable, as it were, sell their product. And so from Zoom coaching to walking people through how to talk through internal culture and what that does for marketing and what that does for that. And so from then I started doing more into the email marketing campaigns and helping people learn those kinds of things. And again, it's all just flexibility and a growth mindset, a willing to learn mindset. That I think that's probably the biggest catalyst for me to stay relevant in context with people. Sure. is to be able to be willing to learn them, learn their processes and what they need, and then how to learn the next step to help them achieve that.
That's great, man. So last question for you, then I'll give you the floor for anything else that we didn't cover that you want. How do you, I want to ask it's a fancy way of asking the question, how do you get out of bed in the morning? I'm not asking for literal, like right foot first, because I'm on that part of the bed. I'm more like, how do you maintain consistency in pursuing marketing yourself and pursuing marketing your business? Not just getting up and going through the grind of the day and doing things, but how do you continue to maintain consistency in pushing yourself and your brand forward?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Lean into your 3 here.
Yeah, right. I mean, to tell you, I do go right foot first because I am on that side of the bed. But I think for me, I have a real problem and always have with self-promotion. And I feel like that gets into this territory, but it's really not, right? Like, when I look at it, I think the thing that makes it okay for me to talk about my business and talk about my wins and try to sell myself is that I'm not selling necessarily what I think you need. Like, I'm not selling a product. I'm selling helping you find answers to your problems. Yeah. And so I think, honestly, that thing that drives me in that is the win that we're creating for the client, the new friendship, the new relationship, whatever. And I get a little iffy. Like I don't have a Facebook page for my business. To be fair, my website right now is 2 pages. Like, it's here's who I am, here's what I do, let's talk. Like, that's the whole focus of it, is to start the conversation rather than here's my portfolio, here's my big, case study, here's my thing. Cause I don't necessarily need it to be about me, but at the same time it is. And so that's honestly, it's something I'm still struggling with, and trying to figure out. When I branded my business back in, it was 2016, I think it was. Yeah, 2016. There was my business is called 43 Creative, and that comes from Psalm 40 verse 3, which is sing a new song to the Lord. Because at that time I was really leaning into graphic design and for churches and particularly some music stuff. And so it was a good fit, right? Like, we're saying new things. And I'm like, okay, great. I'm just going to run with it. And my website sat with an under construction page, please pardon our mess, for years, to get to the point where I could finally figure out how to say, what my business does is helps your brand sing a new song. Because we help you figure out how to tell your story in a way that is passed down, because song has been used for generations. So like, it's a way to make the connect, but it took me a long time to get there. And so I think as part of that, like, the thought of me getting out of the bed, knowing that I have to go hustle and push and sell myself, feels real dirty. But when I can turn around and say, you know what, though, I'm not trying to push myself, I'm trying to help you push to be better. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest way that I can see those wins and keep myself getting out of bed every morning, is to just constantly be focusing on how can I help other people over myself.
Yeah. Man, I love that so much. I'm so grateful for your time today. And I know we could talk about it more. We'll probably have our own podcast come out soon, just the two of us, called a couple of fours, winging three or something like that.
While we eat wings.
While we eat wings, three wings.
What was that? What's the hot show?
Oh, hot wings. Yeah.
Hot ones. We could do our own virtual hot ones.
But it'd be more feelings.
How does this one make you feel?
Does this make you feel? If you want to learn more about PJ and his awesome story and his business based out of Indianapolis, you can go to 43creative.com. That is spelled out FORTYTHREE creative.com. And he would love to come alongside you and help tell your story in a new way. I think that'd be amazing. Highly recommend it. Love PJ. Everything that he does is amazing, and you should definitely check it out whenever you get a chance. I want to remind you that you can subscribe to this podcast on any audio podcast platform that you're listening on. If you're watching on YouTube, we'd love for you to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell, all those types of things. But I want to remind you that we're here to help creatives know themselves, their process, and their teams, so that they can create greater things together. In PJ's case, create a brand new song. Get out there and do it this week. We'll talk to you next time.